Our workshop chums, who is none other than our very own Tony Winard.
Thank you, Keith. I've got to start off by saying I've had some technical issues, and there was supposed to be a keynote or PowerPoint presentation. You won't be getting that, so you're just going to have to listen to me instead. So, have you ever been asked to be a Master of Ceremonies at any type of a social event? Because the thing is, when we become a proficient public speaker, it makes the chances of that happening far greater. Simply because of being a proficient speaker, people think that necessarily, or that makes it that you will be easy to do the Master of Ceremonies role, which isn't always the case. But there are various things in acting as a Master of Ceremonies that actually can help us in Toastmasters, such as the way that the Master of Ceremonies does, or gives so much attention to the introduction, or introducing someone. So before we go any further, I mean, Keith's already mentioned this, but I just wanted to kind of repeat about the mobile operated devices. If you do have any, please put them on stun or pleasure mode, or otherwise you're going to be, one of three things will happen if your mobile operated device goes off. You'll either be asked to sing a song, do a dance, or tell a joke, and your neighbours will decide which one you do. So. And I'll be taking questions towards the end, so if you do have any questions, if you could write them down, and we'll do a little Q&A session a little bit later. Okay, so good evening fellow Athenians, Toastmasters, and to all our very welcome guests. We always have lots of guests here at Athenians. A wedding or a civil partnership it's a great family occasion, and everyone wants to do their best to make it a fantastic day and a very enjoyable day. Emotions are high, and nerves can really make an impact on your voice. Public speakers warm up their voices before occasions where they actually need to speak, and to ensure that the message really gets across. So we're going to do a short warm-up routine, which is going to involve a bit of interaction. It's going to be a little bit of fun during this workshop. It's not going to be a case of you just sitting there listening to me talk away. So if I could get everyone on your feet, please. Right, what we're going to do, we're going to loosen up a little bit. We're going to do something for your posture. It's called the ragdoll exercise. So if you can just kind of let yourself go free, let your hands go free, breathe out, and then slowly breathe in as you bring your head up, slowly uncurl, and bring your head up last. And you should be standing tall and proud because you've got something important to say. And then just repeat, just go loose again, and slowly bring your head up as you breathe in, and your head is the last thing that comes up. Okay, something else about when you're about to give any kind of speech or presentation rather, is about the actual breathing, because most of us don't really breathe correctly. We breathe too much through our chest. We should be breathing down in this region. It makes it much easier to project better and to speak better as well. So what I want you to do is to focus on your breathing by, as you breathe in, try to make your ribs go out rather than your chest. So as you take a nice deep breath, but not too deep, make your ribs go out rather than your chest, and your shoulders shouldn't be moving at all. Just do that a couple of times. And try not to take in too many gallons of air, because that can make you a bit light-headed. So just not too much air as you breathe in. And another thing about breathing properly, and as I said, it helps you to project better. And then when we had the air conditioning on, it's not a problem because you can easily talk over that and people at the back can still hear you quite clearly. Okay, next we're going to work on our lips. Our lips need to be flexible. I can see Peter practicing already. So again, if you could breathe in at the lowest rib, and as you breathe out, pretend it's a really cold day. Do this a couple of times, breathe in. I wish I had a camera now. Now we're going to work on the tongue, and this looks even better from where I'm standing. So I want you to stick your tongue out as far as you possibly can, and then point to the left, to the center, to the right, back to the centre, swallow, and we're going to repeat one more time. So go to the left, I wish I had a camera, centre, to the right, and back to the centre, and swallow. Peter, you look a picture. Guys, you can take a seat. That's our warm-up. I was actually going to do a tongue twister, but I think I'll go over that. Okay, so one of the things that we really need as when we're speaking is to always have a glass or a bottle of water on hand, because your voice needs the water to, even if you don't feel that you're thirsty, you need a glass of water because your voice needs humidity to work effectively. And so it's best if it's room temperature water as well. And if using a microphone, make sure that you don't hold the microphone too close to your mouth, because apart from the fact that it makes it difficult for people to hear you and you often become very muffled on the microphone, there's a far greater chance of a popping sound when certain consonants, so when you're saying letters like T, letters that begin with T, D, B or S, you get a real popping sound which doesn't sound so great. So if you do hold a microphone, it's best to hold it around this position rather than too close to your mouth. So you're aiming at even clarity so that your heartfelt wedding message can really be appreciated by everybody in the room. Now, one of the most important things that we can do is the very first time we speak to an audience, and whether that be on the mic or just simply projecting our voice, is we need to get their attention in the first place. And so we use an attention statement. And the way that most people do this is simply by saying, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the most common attention statement that most people use. And that's all that is, that line. It's not actually saying anything, it's simply to get people's attention in the first place. But it's very important that there needs to be a pause after you say that, because typically the way that is used, there's a room full of people, it might be something like a drinks reception, or there's lots of people talking, and so you're trying to get their attention before you're going to give them some kind of an important message. What many inexperienced people do when they do the role of the Master of Ceremonies is they say ladies and gentlemen and go straight into the message, and they don't give people a chance to stop talking, and so most people miss what they've actually said, or they certainly miss the first few words. And a typical example will be something along the lines of, trying to give an example I've got. So they say, ladies and gentlemen, can I please ask you to make your way into the Beaumont room for the wedding breakfast? Now, because there was no pause, many people will have missed the actual message. And there's two reasons for the pause. One is when you say ladies and gentlemen and then you pause, because of the silence, many people will stop talking, and as the room gets quieter, the people that haven't stopped talking feel obliged to stop talking because then there's a bit of silence. And then you deliver the message, whatever it is that you need to say, whether you need to tell people to go somewhere or whatever it is you might be doing. So that's the main reason for the pause. So the better way to do it would be, right, ladies and gentlemen, please can I ask you if you could make your way into the Beaumont room for the wedding breakfast? And everyone hears the message nice and clear. And the silence stops most conversations as well. So just to repeat, the reason you use the pause after an attention statement is to get people's attention, and so they can clearly hear the message, and it stops all the conversations. And you also gain people's respect by, from the very first time that you do any kind of introduction, any kind of announcement, you're taking control of the room, and people start to respect you. Whereas if you just say ladies and gentlemen, carry on, and people start to, you see many Masters of Ceremonies or people doing that role, especially duty managers in hotels, they tend to be ignored because they haven't gained the respect of the room, because they just carry on talking and no one's really listening to what they're saying. Right, so another thing that's important when you're doing a Master of Ceremonies role or any sort of introductions, it's very important to always pronounce the names of the people that you're introducing. So make sure you know how to pronounce the names of the people. So check with them. Don't just assume you know how to pronounce the names. Because I've seen many a time someone's gone to do the announcement and they just presume that it must be said like this. And it can cause offence, and it does not show a lot of respect to the person you're introducing as well. So always try to make sure you know exactly how to pronounce the person's name. So what is an introduction? It's just simply a matter of saying someone's name and a few filler words. Pretty easy, yeah? Not really. And what is the difference between an announcement and an introduction? Well, an announcement, as the word suggests, is you're just simply making an announcement. Something along the lines of, the fire exits are over there, or later in the bar, Chucks will be buying around for everybody. Whereas an introduction should have some personalisation into it. You're building expectation, you're establishing credibility for the person being introduced. Something else that's quite important that a lot of people do when they do any kind of introduction, they often end with the lines of, so let's have a round of applause, or let's hear it for, or various lines, and they're asking for applause. When it's done properly, you don't need to ask for applause, because applause should come from the heart, not from the hands. If you're giving people a reason to applaud, you don't need to ask them to actually clap. And it'll be more real and transfer into the rest of the occasion. So, for example, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for one of the most important parts of today's ceremony. It's time for the speeches! And normally people would start clapping, but obviously you guys are a bit too cool for that. So, if you do it naturally, people will just clap. Simply ending your introduction with the person's name will often inspire the audience to clap, if you use the inflection at the correct point in the introduction. However, if you use the inflection, if you use the person's name in the middle of the sentence, it can lead to all kinds of problems. For example, and I'll give you a couple of examples of how a duty manager in a typical venue will often introduce someone. Actually, if you could pretend you're now guests at a wedding, and just react how you would at a wedding, and clap where you feel it would be appropriate. So, ladies and gentlemen, can I introduce Mike Smith? When you put the name in the middle of the sentence, people naturally start clapping as soon as they hear the name, and then what's said after the name is missed. And I've seen so many people doing the Toastmaster role or the chairperson's role, introduce a speaker, and they say the person's name halfway through the sentence, the audience starts clapping, and they miss the rest of what's said. The applause line is the person's name. The applause line is what causes people to start clapping. Always, the applause line is at the end of whatever it is you're saying. So if you're saying you're introducing someone, that person's name is always the last two words that you say, always. So it's a case of a slight edge principle. Often, many times the introduction, there's nothing actually wrong with the words used in the introduction, it's just simply the words and maybe the wrong order. And it's simply a case of moving the name to the end and putting whatever else needs to be said, just restructuring how you've actually constructed your phrase, your sentence, however it is you're introducing someone. When using a microphone, we always need to lead the applause whenever we do any kind of introduction. So if you're ever using a microphone, you think, how am I going to lead the applause if I'm holding a microphone? The easiest way to do it is as soon as you've done the introduction, you put the microphone under your armpit and you can start clapping. I think, oh, that's not very nice putting it under there. But if you put the head of the microphone there, for one thing you avoid any feedback in the room when you get that awful sound, and it muffles it, and you can lead the applause. And if it's your microphone, it doesn't really matter. There are three parts to a good introduction. We've already talked about the attention line or the attention statement, which is often simply ladies and gentlemen. Then there's the information, where you're actually giving people some information, what's about to happen, who it is that's speaking, or whatever it might be. And there's the applause line, where people naturally start clapping. And the applause line is usually the person's name. So if I could we could do one more little interactive piece. So if I can get you on your feet again, please. And I need you to get in teams of 3 to 5 people. Do not be in teams of 2. So the guys on this side, you can probably get in teams of 4, because there's lots of 4. Yeah, on this side you get 4 as well. So get in teams of 3 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever you do, not teams of 2, please. Teams of 6, that's fine. Or 3, whatever. And guys, if you could all please put your right hand in the air, pointing your index finger up to the ceiling, and on a count of 3, I want you to point at your team captain. 3! Team captains, please remain standing. Everyone else, please sit. So team captains are the people who have the most points.
We have to have a captain.
So whoever was pointed at by the rest of the team, you are the team captain. Everyone else, please, can you sit down?
What happens if everybody got one vote to be team captain? How do we
The
deal with
lady
that?
becomes captain then.
I think the lady should become captain, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, team captains, do you think that was a fair process?
No.
Not really, was it? Okay, team captains, your first assignment. I want you to look at the people that just voted you into office. And your second assignment is to choose a new team captain. Please point at the new team captain. So, new team captains, please stand. Old team captains, you can sit down.
Yes, of course.
And don't these guys look happy that they've just been made team captains? Okay guys, you're going to find out, it will become apparent soon why you've been asked to be team captain. So for now, if you could please sit down.
I'm going to sit up and get yours.
Introducing the wedding speeches during the wedding it's far more responsibility than you may realise. And it's the same thing for introducing someone in Toastmasters if you're introducing someone who's about to speak. But especially in a wedding situation, the person doing a speech, often it's the father of the bride, is the first speech. And they're often extremely nervous about having to give a speech. And if you don't do a very good introduction or you use unsuitable humour, you could completely ruin their speech and they just become really flustered and they give an awful speech. And that's all down to your introduction, maybe trying to be clever or trying to use some humour which wasn't really that appropriate. So you have a lot of responsibility when you give an introduction in a situation like that. But even in Toastmasters, you might be introducing someone for their icebreaker and they're really nervous, and the reason they've come here in the first place is to overcome their nerves. And if you don't give them a warm introduction and really make them feel welcome and really build them up and motivate them to give a good speech, their speech may not go as well as they hoped and we all hoped. So you have a lot of responsibility when you introduce someone for a speech. So what I'd like you to do actually, if you could take 1 minute, maybe on the back of your programs, I think most of you have got a program, write down an introduction. Say you were going to introduce someone at a wedding, be it the best man, father of the bride, you choose who it is you want to introduce, and just write down how you would introduce them at a wedding. Okay, if we can get some of the team captains, if you would stand again, please. And I'd like to get the team captains to do a couple of introductions. I'm sure we've got more than 2 team captains in this room. So Ashen, would you like to do the first introduction?
Ladies and gentlemen, could I call on the father of the bride, Robert?
We call on an old master. I'm sure he's been Master of Ceremonies many times. Peter, would you like to give an introduction?
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to introduce the best man, John Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce the proud father of the bride to make his speech, Joe Bloggs.
We've got a lot of very shy team captains here. Okay, what is a Master of Ceremonies and where does the name come from? A Master of Ceremonies is someone who's versed in all the ceremonies that take part or take place in something like a wedding. They're masterful in the execution of them. So the Master of Ceremony makes sure that the event progresses smoothly and seamlessly, with the majority of guests unaware of what's actually happening, because they're doing lots of stuff behind the scenes that the guests usually are completely unaware of, and all they actually see is the introductions that the Master of Ceremony does. It should be unobtrusive in the organisation, execution and coordination of the event. And remember that if it's an event such as a wedding, and the reason I'm talking about weddings so much is because this is what I specialise in, so I know more about weddings, but it's not only obviously weddings where there's a Master of Ceremonies used or called for, but this is what I'm concentrating on more. And at an event such as a wedding, there's one celebration that's happening throughout the day, but there's many ceremonies that make up that celebration. So all the individual elements, such as the cutting of the cake, the first dance, the speeches, they're all individual ceremonies. So the Master of Ceremonies he's presiding over each of these individual ceremonies, and should be masterful in the execution of all of them and making sure they're all going seamlessly and to plan as well. And each person should be introduced warmly, with emotion and with respect. And the Master of Ceremonies should only be speaking when it's necessary to do so, and not falling in love with the sound of their voice and a microphone and just speaking all the time, because as soon as you start speaking too many times and speaking unnecessarily, the audience just tune you out. Because every time that you interrupt people, or every time you make any kind of introduction, you're interrupting conversations. If you do that too often, you're just going to start to annoy people. And every time we speak, as I said, we are interrupting the guests and we're interrupting their conversations. And the Master of Ceremonies should keep the guests ably informed as to what's happening throughout the day. So it's not simply a case of doing introductions, but often it's a case of letting people know what's going to be happening in around 10 minutes' time. So it could be a situation, ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know, in 10 minutes' time, the wedding cake is going to be cut. So if you do need to use the bathrooms or to go outside for a quick cigarette break, if you could please be back at 6:30. So you're letting people know exactly what's happening, and they have got time to do whatever it is they may need to do. And throughout the day, you are just keeping people informed as to what's going on, so people aren't wondering, oh, what's happening now? And something else that's very important when you're acting as a Master of Ceremonies is to smile, because it puts people at ease. And it shows that you're completely in control, you're confident, even if you don't feel that on the inside, as long as you just look confident. But if you've got a smile, you look confident. And it's like the typical example of the swan. Underneath the water, his legs are going a million miles an hour, but on top of the water, he looks completely serene and calm. And smiling makes you look completely in charge. And people want you to be in charge because you're taking charge of executing the whole day. Actually, if we could do a quick example, I know many of the team captains will try this now, but team captains, if you could look at the other guys in your team, give them a big smile and see what they do. It's infectious. You can't help but smile when someone smiles at you. And if you smile when you're acting as a Master of Ceremonies, you find lots of people in the audience just smile back because they can't help it, especially when you look at them and you smile, people smile back. And that just puts everyone on your side, and you need people to be on your side. Before making any announcements or introductions where there's going to be any kind of a toast given, always make sure that the glasses have been filled before you announce that the toasts are about to happen. I can't tell you the number of times I've been at an event and I haven't been a Master of Ceremonies, and there's been someone, maybe the duty manager of the venue, or one of the traditional English Toastmasters, you know, the guys that wear the red coats, and who supposedly know what they're doing, and they haven't made sure the glasses have been filled before they introduce the toast. And then what happens? The father of the bride, he's not experiencing this, he's not supposed to know. He goes through his speech and he says, can we please toast the bridesmaids, or whoever it might be, and no one's got a full glass. And people start saying, oh, I haven't got any drink. And then there's an uncomfortable pause as the venue staff are quickly filling everyone's drinks, and that takes quite a few minutes. So if you ever are asked to do any introductions such as this, you have to make sure people's glasses are full before you do introduce that there's going to be toast now, or before you introduce the speeches. Something else that's important is to match the energy of the crowd. If you've got a really boisterous crowd, you need to be nice and lively. If it's a very relaxed crowd, very laid back like you guys, then you just stay nice and laid back and not be too over the top or too powerful with your voice and your introduction. Always face the audience. Again, this is talking about a wedding situation. If you are you're doing some kind of an announcement or an introduction that involves the bride and the groom, what I always try to do, if the bride and groom are sitting here, if this is the head table, I always actually stand behind the bride and groom. It puts all the focus on the bride and groom. It's their day. It's not about you. People don't care about you. You're just simply informing everyone. The focus should always be on the bride and groom. So I stand behind them, so it puts the focus on them when I'm giving the introduction or announcement or whatever it may be. Try never to have your back to anyone. It's not always possible in an environment such as a wedding, because the layout of the room often means you've got your back to someone. But try to have your back to as few people as you possibly can as you're addressing the rest of the room. And I've mentioned it before, but I can't stress this enough. Don't overuse the phrase, ladies and gentlemen, because people just start to tune out after a while if you keep using that same attention statement every time. And it just results in you wasting your breath as well, and the audience not knowing what's happening for the rest of the day, because they don't listen to what you say after a while, they just get bored. And a great example, again, talking about the Toastmasters, the guys that wear the red coats as opposed to our friendly Toastmasters that we have here. I worked at a wedding once where the Toastmaster he was interrupting the guests far too often, and every time he was interrupting the guests, he would start off with the line, ladies and gentlemen, every time he did this. And after a while, you could see all their guests raising their eyebrows every time he did this. They were getting really annoyed. And after a while, they just started laughing every time he did it, because you could see them almost having sweepstakes. How many times is he going to say this? And they were completely ignoring the message that he was trying to deliver after the ladies and gentlemen, and it became quite farcical. So there's many other attention statements that can be used. For example, it might be family and friends, or simply welcome, or even could I have your attention please? So mix it up a bit, don't always use ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to take 5 questions now, and then I'll wrap up the message. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, that was a tone.
I'm just wondering the best way to ensure everybody's glasses are charged before you introduce the first speech. Because you don't want to interrupt too much, but you want to make sure everybody's got a full glass of champagne.
So what you would normally do is, behind the scenes, so no one needs to know any of what's going on, you go and talk to the duty manager or whoever's in charge of the catering, and you say, look, we're about to do the speeches, and you make sure that all the glasses are full up, and when they have all been filled, please let me know, and then I'm going to introduce the speeches. And you may have, what I would usually do beforehand, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, in 10 minutes time we are going to be doing the speeches, so it gives people time to go and have a drink, or so go to the toilet rather, or go out for a cigarette break. And while that's going on, you've had a word with the duty manager, so he's filling up the glasses, or the venue staff rather, are filling up the glasses. And then when the speech is introduced, all the glasses are full. Jim?
Question. Do I understand correctly that you're saying the master's energy level should be appropriate to match with the energy in the room?
Whenever possible.
Yeah, but I thought your role is actually to raise up the energy.
It can be, but not always. If it's a wedding and they want a nice, elegant atmosphere, and they don't want the energy maybe too boisterous or whatever it might be, so then it may be more appropriate just to match the level, the energy level in the room. It's It's not a hard and fast rule, you should always match the energy, because there are times where maybe you do need to increase the energy, but often it's the energy level is appropriate for how they want the day to proceed, unless the host or the bride and groom said, can you liven them up a little bit, and then you might be using a bit more energy.
Have you seen situations where a Master of Ceremonies actually dries up and loses their nerve and forgets their lines? And how easy is it to recover from that? Or what kind of techniques can you use to recover?
It's happened to me. I've been going to make an introduction, and in case anyone didn't hear, Julian was saying, has there been a situation where you've heard a Master of Ceremonies dry up and forget what to say? Yeah. There's been many times, well not many times, but there's been times where I've had to do an introduction and I've forgotten the person's name or something, and that was more when I first started doing it. What I do now, there's a little cheat sheets you can do. So for example, because I'm usually normally using a microphone, because there may be 200 or 300 guests, and so I usually hold the microphone in my left hand. I write the bride and groom's name. So when I'm holding the microphone, I can read the bride and groom's name. So I never forget the bride and groom's name, because it's right there. And they're the two most important people on the day. You cannot forget the bride and groom's name. You might get some other people's names, and you try not to make mistakes, it happens. And when you listen to the speeches, it's not uncommon for the father of the bride or the best man to say someone in your own family's name. We all make mistakes, but you don't want to get the bride and groom's name wrong. You certainly don't want to introduce them as Mr. and Mrs. Smith if their name is Mr. and Mrs. Smythe or whatever. Okay, one more.
How soon before you go on stage do you do the vocal warm-up, and does it wear off? You do it, say, half hour before you go on stage?
It's not always possible, but whenever I try to do it, I go outside in a different room if possible, and just to warm the voice up a bit. It depends on how often you're going to be speaking as well as to how important it is. If you're only doing 1 or 2 introductions, it might not be necessary, and if you're using a microphone, it might not be so necessary. But if you're going to be just projecting your voice and not using a microphone, and there's a big audience, then it does become more important, because you really do need to project your voice and so that everyone can clearly hear what it is you're saying. Okay?
As regards microphones, do you have a specific one that you use rather than a lapel one? Or?
I usually use a wireless microphone, so that there's no cable, so you can go anywhere in the room. And there's such a wide range in quality of microphones, from really cheap things that you find at shops like Tandy, those Tandy still exist, or what it's called now, Maplin, so that's what it's called now, through to really expensive microphones that cost sort of £4,000 or £5,000. The cheap ones are often nasty, and you get lots of feedback, and people can't hear you properly. But it's not usually if you're acting as Master of Ceremonies, it's normally the venue that will provide them that, or maybe the DJ that will provide the microphone. There's not so much you can do about that usually. Let's have one more question.
How do you know how to put the microphone close to your mouth and far away?
The microphone should be just under the chin, a slight gap between here. So it's nice that everyone can easily hear you. If it's too close, it becomes muffled. If it's too down here, no one can hear what you're saying. So we've almost got the red light, so sorry, go on track. So essentially, the next time you introduce a speaker, whether that be at a situation if you've been asked to be a Master of Ceremonies and you're introducing speeches, or even if you're here as the chairperson or the Toastmaster, if we can remember to give people an introduction that will really pique the audience's interest and make the audience want to hear what the speaker has to say, by establishing the credibility of the speaker, that it in itself generates an enthusiastic applause without you having to ask for the applause. And it gives the speaker confidence as they take the stage. So thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of the meeting, and I'm going to hand you back to your fantastic chairperson, Keith.